It was often said all sociologists wanted to move to Sweden, but that's another story. Okay, the title of his forthcoming paper is Upbeat Leadership, a recipe for or against successful leadership theory. It's going to be published in a journal called the Leadership Quarterly. Increasingly with academic journals, they make available papers that are going to be published, but what that means is we don't have a volume number, an issue number, or any page numbers. But if you have access to the journal, and all these journals are firewalled, you can have a look at the paper, a sort of sneak preview, and when on my radar this one popped up, I was on it straight away, and I found it fascinating. So really this is a heads up to anyone studying or working in the field who's sort of open to a more critical conceptualisation of leadership studies. If you are, you'll love this. If not, you'll think you'll hate it, let's say. So there's the academic health warning before we start. There was something else I was going to say which was profound, but it seems to have slipped away. Hopefully come back to me as I ramble on. Oh yeah, I remember. I remember now why I forgot. I need to declare an interest. So Leadership Quarterly is the most prestigious leadership academic journal. It's in no way my favourite journal, but certainly everything's ranked in universities ad infinitum. This is ranked as the most prestigious. What I'd forgot was I had two papers which I submitted to this journal. They went through the desk review and then they went through the full peer review, and both got rejected. No wonder I forgot. So I need to declare an interest if you see me as biased, bitter or hostile. It's probably true, but all credit to the reviewers and the editors who dealt with my submissions. I'm not fighting the outcome. I just what I needed to, in terms of full disclosure, disclose that. What I would say is I've extensively read Alvesson's work, and I cite it throughout my work extensively, so I'm very familiar with his position. And I am impressed that he got this paper into Leadership Quarterly. It is a Trojan horse of a paper, and I commend the editor and the reviewers for allowing this to be published in this journal. Trojan horse. He doesn't point the finger at Leadership Quarterly, but a lot of what he's saying for me is pertinent to the papers published in Leadership Quarterly and the journey that particular journal has been on. So, Trojan horse, and all credit for them for wheeling the Trojan horse in. Who knows, in the future they might publish Hughes. I'm 99.9% certain they won't, but in terms of my therapy reading this paper, it was really good, because I certainly share his concerns. So the abstract, I'll just read out verbatim. In the last 40 years, leadership studies have moved from a condition of near despair, where complaints of slow progress were commonplace, to a situation of self-confidence and self-praise. So in my writings I talk a lot about that. Leadership studies, in one of the most famous books, Leadership, in 1978, James McGregor Burns referred to the field of leadership studies as suffering intellectual mediocrity. Now, Alvesson would aim similar criticisms, and he does in this paper. Dennis Turish has done some similar overviews of where leadership studies is at, and I share his concerns equally. What this paper is trying to say is, whilst those two critical scholars and myself and others question where we are with leadership studies, if you ask most academics outside the field and vice chancellors and others out there, they would all say we know so much about leadership studies today, it's phenomenal. We don't. We really don't. It's all smoke and mirrors, and all credit to this professor to get a paper in effect spelling that out is wonderful. How did this happen then? Because bright people would tell you that we know so much about leadership studies. There's a huge volume of literature, but he gets to it in the abstract here. It's made possible through an unusual convention characterising leadership studies, which produces a recipe for flawed but publishable research and career progress. So in effect, if you can make a minute contribution to one aspect of leadership, that can be published in this journal. But whether or not it really advances our understanding of leadership, he's asking that awkward question. Leadership Quarterly was famous for publishing many, many papers on transformational leadership. And people make little incremental additions to transformational leadership in a particular context, at a particular level, in a particular scenario. But does it add up to that much? Perhaps that's for another video anyway. He then says something that most academics know, but he spells it out awfully pointedly. And I can't give you page numbers because it hasn't been paginated yet, but it's on the first page if you're having a look through, making up your own mind. The centrality of journal publishing means a displacement of purpose. The journal article becomes not primarily a means of quality improvement and dissemination, but the main goal in itself. So sadly, over the 30 years that I was writing journal papers, I really did, when I was a young person, I was excited to share knowledge and get it out there. There was a bit of that ego of getting published. It's a lovely driver, but it wasn't as pertinent as it became in later years. So the mantra has become publish or perish, and really it's just getting it published. If it adds to what we know about leadership studies, great. If it doesn't, as long as it's published in a prestigious journal, you'll get your promotion. Your university will get the extra funding that it so craves. So he says that point very pointedly, and we'll see that in print when this is finally fully published. He says we need to be wary of the recipes and guidelines for success. Too much of leadership studies has been how can leadership be successful? It never asks about the failures of leadership. It doesn't ask those important questions. Remember the paraphraser I was going on about from Foucault in the last video review. He's in that sort of space here when he's asking this awkward stuff about leadership. Upbeat leadership studies are academic reports and texts with a clear and strong positive message, basically assuming and showing that good leadership leads to good outcomes. 100% agree with him. Should he say that? Because that exactly as it is. So many people much more senior than me built their careers on that recipe. So I don't know if he should. And then in a summing up, generally I find much published work unconvincing and based on problematic assumptions, relying on a good deal of naive faith, camouflaged with rhetoric and technical details. Sounds like one of the review reports on one of my papers, but yeah, he's got it there. I'll do it on another video for you, but I looked at the literature on leading organisational change, and it fits that to the T. But then when I started to disseminate, share that with others, I said, no, go back and look harder, find some successful stuff. And these were professors, these were editors of journals who were saying, no, go back and get some successful stuff. There must be, because we're all leading change now. And I mean, you want me to pretend? So all credit to Alvesson. I'm so delighted, as you can probably tell, that this paper's out. He does a clever thing towards the end, and I guess it's the difference between the mere mortals like me and the top professors. They do the clever thing, and it's the clever thing that we'll probably remember this paper for. he comes up with a table, academics love tables, and it's headed up 20 debatable elements in contemporary leadership studies and suggested alternatives. 20 debatable elements in contemporary leadership studies and suggested alternatives. So this is clever. He looks at the success recipe that's so bothering him and his critique is aimed at. He spells 20 examples of those out. But then a critical scholar might leave it at that and say, right, critique done, I'm off down the pub. But no, he then offers an antidote. So for the academics of tomorrow, the young women and men who will hopefully deliver us a more robust account of leadership studies, he offers them a roadmap, and all credit to him. I'm not going to go through all 20, I'll bore myself and I'll bore you, but I'll pick out 3. So 7 and 8. If you want to be successful, and I'm sure there might be academics watching this who want to be successful, use questionnaires, round of interviews, or other simple methods. Take data at face value. Emphasise what they say and neglect what they may not say so much. That's what you should do if you want to get on in these top journals. But that's the success recipe. He says the antidote, though, is get close to leadership practice, follow process, be suspicious about data unless carefully source checked. Make sure that you study something other than questionnaire filling behaviour or interview talk. It's beautiful. I do think pragmatically to actually get close to leadership practice is exceptionally difficult, and but again, he's offering us what might be. So not going to criticise Alvesson, am I? No, cool Jude. Number 19 of it is 20 things. So for those of you who just want the successful recipe, stick to your knitting for a long time. Engage in your substream. Do not complicate things with broader scholarship or intellectual orientations that may disrupt your focus. So the best scholars become experts in their field of expertise. Sorry, that's tautological, isn't it? But what I'm getting at is if you want to get on, if you want to be in this successful column, what you want to do is just, do leadership or do organisational change. Whatever you do, don't what I did and cross over and oscillate between the two. But then what he does say is his antidote in number 19. He says avoid being a silo thinking expert. After X years as a leadership expert, something else could be worth exploring. And that was what happened for me. I initially started organisational change. I moved into leadership, and in recent years I've been moving between the two. And I've learned so much about organisational change from seeing it from the field of scholars and peers who are respecting the leadership studies field. It's that old chestnut of being interdisciplinary, but it's more than just putting a funding bit in with a mix of disciplines. It's actually moving between them. And Alvesson, in fairness, I tracked his work for years, and it was relatively late that he began to question leadership. So he actually practices what he preaches there. And then the last one. If you want to be successful, he says, suppress any sign of irony or doubt in your research and publishing endeavours. Unfortunately, irony and doubt leaked out of all my stuff before I decided to concentrate more on gardening. But lovely to see him saying that, and I encountered that at the raw end. But what he says, and what I'll leave you with today, is in his antidote in terms of how we might take forward leadership studies: work with self-irony, irony and playfulness. I love it. Remember, that's not the column to be successful out, but that's the column that would advance what we know about leadership, and it would inform leadership theories and practices. But I can't see it happening.